The film opens in New York City, where we see a high-rise called the Millennium Building. Two debased security officers are using a telescope to spy on prostitutes in another building. Where did they get a telescope? When their boss summons them, they head to the elevator. One of them goes to the bathroom while his associate waits outside. At this point, the man sees the elevator acting oddly, and his flashlight is squashed between the doors. But before he can figure out what happened, his partner returns from the bathroom, and they both enter the elevator. The following morning, we meet two mechanics, Mark and Jeff, who work for an elevator company. Mark complains that his job is boring, but an irritated Jeff advises him to appreciate what he has. Incidentally, Jeff had arranged this new position for him, so he asks his friend not to disappoint him again. Back at the Millennium Building, a group of pregnant women enters the elevator after their regular exercise meeting. However, instead of taking them to their designated floor, it begins to drop rapidly. One of the terrified women presses the open button, but it doesn't work. When they realize they are stuck, they panic and attempt to call for help, but there's no signal. The situation becomes so intense that two women end up going into labor. Meanwhile, outside the elevator, building officials become aware of the situation. Two workers are summoned and attempt to open the door, but are unsuccessful. A security officer gets very worried when he learns that his pregnant wife is inside. He grabs a large axe and makes a desperate attempt to break the door, which seems dangerous. In the end, the door opens by itself, and the guards are shocked to find that two women have given birth inside. "We love adrenaline," say the babies. The scene then moves to Mark and Jeff arriving at a diner for breakfast. They sit down to eat, but Jeff suddenly gets a call about the malfunctioning elevators in the Millennium Building. This forces the duo to leave their breakfast and rush to the location. Elsewhere, we meet a young journalist named Jennifer, who is called to her boss's office. He informs her about the incidents involving the Millennium Building's malfunctioning elevator. He then orders her to go there immediately and cover the story before their rivals. This is hot stuff. Soon after, Jennifer arrives at the building and sees many women being taken into an ambulance. She attempts to interview them, but the medical staff escorts them away. Meanwhile, Mark and Jeff also arrive at the building and meet with a building staff member. The guy leads them to the motor room while explaining the earlier incident. He also talks about Jeff's former partner, Karaski, who had committed the unthinkable. Elevator maintenance really is boring, but this only annoys Jeff, and he asks the guy to leave. The pair then get to work and start checking every piece of equipment in the motor room. But even after hours of examination, they fail to find anything wrong. Somewhere in the building, a blind man and his dog are seen leaving a salon. He boards an elevator, but quickly realizes that the buttons are not working properly. This drives him out to take another elevator instead. But when he opens the door, we see that there is nothing to step on except a huge void. His dog barks a few times to warn him, but the man fails to understand. What else could the barks mean? Unfortunately, he falls into the deep hole, pulling his dog, who didn't deserve this, along with him. At night, Mark goes to see his girlfriend at her home. The couple had a fight the previous night, so he has brought her flowers to apologize. But, shockingly, he finds her sleeping with another man, breaking his heart. "I am keeping these flowers." Meanwhile, two security guards in the Millennium Building are informed that the elevators are acting strangely again. After investigating, they find an elevator door that opens and closes on its own. One guard peeks inside and finds the dog swinging from a rope in the shaft. We should blur that out. Before he can report the situation, the door closes suddenly, trapping his head between them. He urges his partner to do something, but the elevator starts to descend, brutally executing him, leaving his partner terrified. Subsequently, Mark returns to the building, and Jennifer follows him into the restroom. She asks about the elevators for her report, but Mark dismisses her, claiming that all is well. When she persists, he wryly comments that elevators enjoy killing people, and that 1 out of every 10 people who enter them could die. Jennifer isn't satisfied with his response and continues to follow him, but the security guards restrain her. Later, Jeff and Mark meet with the building's manager, Milligan, and other executives. They inquire about the inspection, and Jeff explains that they run a thorough check but found no defects. Mark then suggests they close the elevator for a few days so they can conduct further investigation. However, Milligan claims it's not feasible as they will incur significant financial losses. Jeff also agrees with them and assures that the elevator is completely safe. Why don't you get in it, Jeff? The next morning, when Mark comes to work, he is shocked to find that Jennifer has published his face in the paper. She has also written about his statement that elevators are dangerous. His boss, Mitchell, brings him to his office and confronts him about his statement. Mark apologizes, claiming that he was just joking and didn't expect her to write about it. However, Mitchell reveals that because of the news, police are now considering Mark a suspect. Yet again, they're alluding to him as Darth Liv. Later, Mark sees Jeff arguing with a man wearing a sterile jacket. After asking his partner, he finds that the man is Dr. Steinberg, who designs the electronic parts of their lift. Mark then inquires about Jeff's former associate Kowalski and discovers that he committed the unimaginable by setting himself and his car on fire. Lift repair is truly exhausting. Meanwhile, we see two people skating into the Millennium Building's garage. Minutes later, one of them collides with a car and gets injured. He sits on the floor for a while, but suddenly the lift door behind him opens and sucks him inside. It then takes him to the 86th floor, from which he is thrown out of the building to his death. In a little while, Mark sees the news on TV and finds that the police have ruled it as a suicide. He rushes to the building to investigate, but the guards won't let him in. At this moment, he spots Jennifer among the journalists and quickly approaches her. She apologizes for writing about him, stating that she had nothing else for her story. Mark forgives her this time, but asks her not to mention him again in her paper. At night, Jennifer pays Mark an unexpected visit at his home. She shows him CCTV footage of the skater's death, which is very peculiar. Jennifer points out that the time it typically takes for the lift to ascend 86 stories would be around 40 seconds to a minute. However, in the video, the lift reaches those floors in under 2 seconds. Hearing the phrase under 2 seconds makes Mark reflect on why his ex left him. He is stunned by the information and struggles to understand what's happening. They then go to meet Jeff and try to show him the video, but he seems preoccupied with something else. He refuses to listen to them and drives off somewhere. Later, at a CAF, Mark explains to Jennifer how different parts of the lift work. He also talks about Steinberg, who designed the lift's electronic parts for his company. The two then go to Jennifer's office and do some research on Steinberg. They find that his first name is Gunnar, and he once experimented with biologically duplicating microchips using dolphin brains. The project went wrong, and Steinberg was fired because the computers kept going. He then started working for the lift company as he had a lot of experience in the field. After learning all this, Jennifer is convinced that Steinberg is involved in the mysterious deaths. The next morning, Milligan is wandering around the building when he finds Jeff's body in a deep hole. When Jennifer and Mark arrive, they are shocked to learn that the police have again ruled it as a suicide. Moreover, the building executives labeled Jeff as a terrorist and informed the public that the threat is over. Mark doesn't believe that his friend could do such a thing, so he and Jennifer set off to find the truth. In the early afternoon, the pair decides to visit the house of Kowalski, who died some time ago. There, they meet with his widow, who reveals that her husband didn't die in a car accident. She explains that he was killed in a deep hole because he knew something he shouldn't have known. According to the woman, her husband's soul still haunts the lift, and that's why people are constantly dying. Back in the building, we see a group entering the lift. Things start to go wrong again when the lift begins to accelerate rapidly. Someone quickly presses the emergency button, which obviously doesn't work. This sends everyone into a state of panic, and one kid even soils his pants. To make matters worse, the floors suddenly split, causing people to fall into the shaft and die. The lift then continues to speed up until it finally bursts through the top of the building. After the incident, the President of the United States gives a statement, calling it an act of terrorism. A SWAT team is then stationed at the building to prevent anyone from entering. Meanwhile, Mitchell meets with Steinberg and blames him for everything. The latter claims that it is only a minor mishap in his rather grand plans that will change humanity. Mitchell refuses to believe this and urges him to find a solution as soon as possible. However, Steinberg states that things have gone out of control and are beyond his reach. At night, Jennifer arrives at the building in a van while Mark hides in the back seat. She claims that he's from the lift company, but the guards ask her to open the van door. Jennifer hesitantly obliges and steps out to open the door. All of a sudden, she gets a call from her coworker, whom she had asked to investigate Steinbeck. He reveals that even after Steinbeck was fired, he continued to work on biochips, but not with dolphin brains, but with something else. He urges Jennifer to be careful and hangs up the phone. During this time, Mark manages to slip out of the van and enter the Millennium Building. In the next scene, the police find out that Jennifer was not sent by the lift company, so they lock her in a room. Mark, on the other hand, finds a large biochip resembling a giant brain in a deep hole. It turns out, this organ is still alive and controls the lifts. He tries to destroy it with a screwdriver, but fails as a descending lift plummets toward him. Mark barely escapes while the lift kills a SWAT officer who is just getting out of the shaft. Mark then finds the officer's rocket launcher and attempts to destroy the organ. Is this a cartoon, or what am I recapping? But Steinbeck shows up and intervenes. He points a gun at Mark and tells him not to destroy his creation. The two then get into a fight, and Steinbeck nearly kicks Mark down the shaft. But Jennifer arrives just in time and holds him at gunpoint. At this moment, the SWAT team shows up and orders everyone to drop their weapons. Steinbeck quickly seizes the opportunity to take Jennifer hostage, but she manages to break free. Moments later, the villain is attacked by his own creation and sucked inside, along with Mark. But Jennifer manages to pass the rocket launcher to Mark just in time. He then grabs the launcher and fires at the organ, finally destroying it. The force of the explosion pushes him out while Steinbeck's mangled body falls seconds later. The scene then shifts to a few days later, where Mark is seen leaving the hospital after his recovery. Jennifer arrives to pick him up, and as they leave, they become trapped in a lift. She starts freaking out, thinking the demon is back, but Mark suddenly starts laughing, revealing that it was just a prank. Mark, you dick. The film ends as he pulls her closer and kisses her.